Namaskaram. Welcome to the fourth episode of the series named From Taboo to Truth, where we explore different aspects of Indian mysticism and Sanatan Dharma. In the last episode, we learned about different aspects of human intelligence. In this episode, we will learn about the Guna theory and how it affects our spiritual process. So let's start. Before we start off with the Guna theory, we need to have a little background from which this theory has emerged. In the second episode, we all learned about seers or munis who see the world as it is. The Sanatan Dharma has produced many such seers, and among the most extraordinary ones, the one who is most revered as a seer is Muni Kapila. The amount of reverence that he received has been clearly established by the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna declares that among all the munis, he is Kapila. Seers basically see the world without sense interpretations and come up what is known as darshan, which means seeing as it is. The word also translates into philosophy. Out of the many darshans he gave, the most prominent one is the Sankhya darshan, from where the theory of Guna comes up. However, it is a very vast discussion and can't be confined to a single episode. So I will try my level best to give you all a bird's eye view of it. However, if you are more interested to find out, there are links in the description given below. So let's start. The word Guna has different meaning in different contexts, but the context that we will be taking, the Guna translates into a cord or thread or constituent strand of primordial materiality, which is called Prakriti. In layman terms, the Prakriti or the material nature has been created with the fabric of these three gunas, which are Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. These three threads are always intertwined with each other, and they create the tapestry of our sensory reality. And this tapestry is what we call as Maya. The tapestry of Maya is viewed or perceived differently by different beings because each of those beings are influenced differently by different proportions of these three gunas. Let's look at each one of them one by one. The first guna or the thread is called Tamas, which is also known as the thread of inertia, or if we say in psychosocial aspect, the thread of laziness. It is due to this thread that makes the rock sit still. Or if we relate it in terms of physical sciences, the guna is the basis of Newton's first law of motion, which states that things want to stay as they are or things want to keep doing which they are already doing until and unless an external force is applied, or in other words, things are lazy, and this laziness is nothing but inertia. If we talk in context of spiritual sciences, tamas is characterized by ignorance. The being who is propagated by the thread of tamas doesn't want to be illuminated with knowledge. He or she will always try to be on those situations and habits that reinforce the property of ignorance in terms of his sensory reality or Maya. Then there is the thread of Rajas. The entities or beings which are created more of this thread has the characteristic of always being in motion or activity. In the physical world, the thread forms the basis of all the forces that keep the objects in motion and in equilibrium, whether it be the electrostatic force, which binds the electron, or the gravitational force, which binds the entire solar system. The thread of Rajas is what forms the basis of activity. The thread lays the foundation of Newton's second law of motion, which defines force. If we talk in the aspect of psychosocial behavior, human beings who have the thread of rajas relatively more can't stay still. They always want to be in some activity or the other. However, if we see our clothes, it is made up of two threads. But interestingly, this universe is created by the intertwinement of three threads. The thread that I am going to address, if was not present, then it would have been impossible for the other two to be intertwined together. The thread that I am addressing is the thread of balance or sattva. It is this thread that holds the other two together. In physical sciences, this thread forms the foundation of Newton's third law of motion, which states that every force has an equal and opposite reaction. The amount of push that you place into the chair you are sitting, the chair will push with the same amount. If it pushes you more, you will fly off, and this balance is due to the thread of sattva. It is this thread that maintains the equilibrium between inertia and activity, or between tamas and rajas. In psychosocial aspect, the being who has more sattva has a balanced way of looking at things. He is neither too lazy nor too active. If we talk in context of spirituality, the person who has relatively more sattva is more content, illumined and compassionate. While tamas is darkness, sattva is light, and these threads always run together and create the entire universe. However, it is possible to increase the intensity of one thread over the other by various spiritual practices and the foods that we ingest. The yogis have classified foods into three categories, depending on which thread it reinforces more. Let's look at a clip to understand it more vividly.
See, this is what I've been saying right through. Why even eating is a moral value. Food is about the body. We must eat what is suitable for this body. But right now you're talking about making food into a habit. I want to tell you, there is no such thing as good habit and bad habit. Habit means you are functioning unconsciously. If you're functioning unconsciously, that's a bad thing, because the whole thing about being human is we are capable of doing things consciously. That is the beauty of being human, that we can do everything consciously. What an animal does unconsciously, we can do the same thing consciously. We can eat unconsciously, or we can eat consciously. We can breathe unconsciously, or we can breathe consciously. Everything that we can do it consciously. The moment we do something consciously, suddenly that human being looks very refined and wonderful. Just because somebody walks and speaks consciously, doesn't he become a beautiful human being? Yes or no? That's all. So why is it that we are trying to develop habits as if there's a good thing? Habit means fixed realities, where you don't have to think. You get up in the morning and it'll happen to you. No, don't try to automize your life. That is not efficiency, that is the efficiency of the machine. This one is supposed to function intelligently and consciously. Nobody is expecting it to function like a machine. So, about food and stuff, food must be suitable for the body that we eat for. It is for the body. This is a building material for this body, the food that you're eating. What is the appropriate food? Unfortunately, is all messed up right now. Traditionally, we ate very sensibly in this country, but these 1,000 years of innovations have brought other kinds of food cultures, and today the national diet is pizza or pasta. What is it? Which is one? I don't know. Both were competing. So, we are losing our sense about food. It's definitely time to look at what is the most suitable thing. If I go into that food, it's a very long process, but you must experiment with food, not just by the tongue, but by the body. You eat something today and see, just learn to observe how agile and how active your body feels after eating this food. If it feels like it wants to go to the grave, that's not good food. If it feels like it wants to be alive after eating this, except coffee, because that's a stimulant. If you eat food and your body feels very agile and alive, that means it's good food, body is liking it. If you eat something, it feels dull, that means it's not liking it, it's having difficulty with it, that's why it feels dull. So just on this basis, there's a much… this is a very simplistic way of putting it.
We must understand this. Food is not a religion, food is not a culture, food is just the fuel for this machine. Yes? There may be cultural aspects to the taste, there may be even religious tinge to the food over a period of time, but essentially food is fuel for this body. So with what kind of food will it function with minimum struggle within itself and maximum impact? So suppose you buy a petrol car and pump diesel into it, it may still roll around but not at its optimum. Similarly, various foods you can eat and still somehow it functions. But those communities which have eaten with care, you can clearly see a distinct difference in the way they function, the levels of intelligence and whatever. So in India, we prescribed food for different people in different way. If you're doing menial jobs, you eat one way because you need physical muscle. If you're doing other kinds of trading and other kinds of activities, you eat another way. If you're a fighting class, you eat differently. And now if you're into education, spiritual process and subtler aspects of life, then you eat differently. So what kind of food do you eat so there is no inertia in the body? In yogic way of seeing things, we are looking at tamas, rajas and sattva. Tamas means inertia, rajas means activity but no balance, sattva means absolutely balanced kind of energy. When you're in education, you need a very balanced kind of energy because you have to focus on something which doesn't naturally interest you. It's not something with which your chemistry is gelling. If your chemistry is gelling, you are always focused on that one, isn't it? Here there's no chemistry, but you have to focus on that. For this you need a balance and a steady mind. For this you need to eat in a certain way. To put it very simply, food goes through your body through the alimentary canal. From your mouth to your anal outlet, there is a pipe. Through this it runs, going through various stages of digestive process. Many of you are biology people, right? So, it goes through the alimentary canal. Now it begins with the lip. Here, if you look at this, all the herbivores and carnivores. If you look at the animal kingdom, there are herbivores and carnivores are two main segments of animals in the world. One eats vegetable matter, another eats meat. If you look at the alimentary canal, the way it is built, between herbivores and carnivores, there's a distinct difference. Everything in the human being suggests that you are naturally a herbivore, but for the sake of survival, we became carnivores. If you look at the jaw movement, all the carnivorous animals have only cutting action. Herbivores have cutting and grinding action. There are molars, but carnivores don't have widespread molars, they have just incisors, canines, everything looks like cutting teeth. So they do only this. All the herbivores do grinding. What do you have? Both. So you are supposed to chew your food. Why you are supposed to chew your food is you have enzymes in your saliva where if you take a little bit of raw rice and put it in your mouth just for a minute, you will see it turn sweet right here because right here carbohydrate is being converted into sugar, right here. So if you eat properly, then we say about 30 to 50% of your digestion should happen in your mouth. So this part of the digestive system is expecting half digested food or partially digested food. But right now the way we're eating is mostly we're putting not only undigested food, but partially destroyed food. So the amount of food that you need to get the same amount of energy has increased. You're eating much more food than what you should eat to generate that much of energy. Because of that, there is inertia in the body, because it has to process so much more food than what it should, there is inertia. Once there is inertia, your sleep quota increases. But if you eat right and do a certain things with your body, you see very effortlessly, within 3 to 4 weeks, you can drop your sleep quota anywhere between 2 to 3 hours. 1.5 to 3 hours very easily you can drop if you just eat consciously and just learn to sit properly, just the posture, your geometry of the body and what goes into the system. If you just manage these two things, you will see sleep quota will just come down like that. There are many aspects to this, but one important aspect is food, how you eat. Not only what you eat, how you eat is also very important, because food is a live thing. Just bring 40 to 50% of the food in its raw form, that means it's alive. It must be a live cell, it can be a vegetable, it can be a fruit, it can be a nut, it can be sprouted gram. At least 40 to 50%, the food that you eat must be alive. You eat dead food and you want to live, this is a little difficult thing to do, because you have to raise the dead now. But if you eat live food, one thing you will see is the state of your mind, your focus and your sleep quotas, and above all, staying awake is not good enough, you have to stay alert, isn't it? How alert you are, how focused you are, only to that extent everything yields to you in this world, isn't it so? What is the level of focus will determine whether the world yields to you or not, isn't it? And one more aspect of life, one more aspect of food is, when you consume something, it must be of a simple genetic code in the sense, it must be a very simple software. Vegetables, fruits, nuts, sprouts, they're very simple. More complicated means animal food becomes more and more complicated. Suppose you eat an animal which has some amount of emotion and a life of its own. Now the code in that, we were talking about this, your body is just an accumulation of memory, which means a certain software, isn't it? This is the most complex software. Human software is the most complex software on the planet of all the creatures. So if you eat an animal, particularly a mammal, if you eat, it has a similar kind of complexity, maybe not as complex as this, similar level of complexity because it has thought and emotion of its own. Now for you to break that code and integrate it into your system, you are not fully successful. So it will leave traces of certain qualities within you. You cannot break that code and make it a part of yours because it's a different and complex code. If you eat a leaf, a vegetable, a fruit, a nut or a sprout, this is much simpler. If you must eat non-vegetarian food, you must eat that which is furthest away from you. So generally, fish and water life is furthest away from you. So if you must eat non-vegetarian food, fish is the best thing to eat that way.
Understanding the three threads or gunas align with the purposes of Sanatan Dharma, which we have discussed in our first episode. The spiritual seeker or the student of spiritual sciences seeks to move from tamas to rajas and then to sattva. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, action is better than inaction, but don't stay there. If you become too rajasic, you become like a whirlwind. So develop a sense of balance and content or sattva. The motive is to move towards action from inaction and then to selfless action, where the entire world is benefited, which coincides with the third feature of Sanatan Dharma. To help in this progression, the rishis did extensive research and came up with various tools and technologies to make this transition more convenient and feasible, which in turn form the basis of spiritual practices or sadhanas. In the next episode, we will talk about the various limbs of Sanatan Dharma and dive more deep into its history. Till then, Namaskar.
सवाल है जो कर रहे हैं गुदगुदी, अनजानी सी प्यास है जो बुझती नहीं, ख्वाहिशें हैं ख्वाब हैं